Hello, everybody. I am Radagast at your service, and this is Mystic Brew. Freedom equals responsibility. I would say really one of the hot stories floating around that kind of affects us all is this new thing about fake news. And with that, false designation floating around about people who are not part of, I guess, what used to be called mainstream news. It is now by many people who are saying it's largely done as far as being a real influence on the majority of people. They're calling it the legacy media. I like to call it the Ministry of Truth. I think that might come from George Orwell's work, 1984. I think, but I do know it was in Harry Potter, and it was a big feature in one of the movies. I don't remember which one of the movies or the books. I've read the books and watched most of the movies. Didn't watch the last movie was broken into two parts. I never bought that book. I went and watched part one. It was definitely one of the most boring movies I've ever seen, and I don't go to many movies. Basically, over the years, I've gone to Tolkien-based movies and J.K. Rowling's, or Harry Potter movies. Other than that, I almost don't go to movies. I do have Amazon Prime membership, so I occasionally can catch some movies that might interest me. I think I saw Captain America: Winter Soldier, which was very good because it gives you some clues about what's going on. I think that's one of the main attractions for a lot of people still going to movies. They want to see what kind of clues about what we're not reported to by the Ministry of Truth, and what kind of things the Hollywood directors might drop in there, and not like that movies are anything other than part of the Ministry of Truth. But disinfo is an interesting recipe because you can't just put the poop in. You got to put the chocolate or the candy coating in there, and then also, I mean, there's also the thing where, it seems to be legit, where the ones who are going to do creepy things to you or things that you really would want them to do you have to be informed at some level, and then when you ignore it, they can go, see, they don't care. Let's just do it. Or they are consenting by not dissenting. So, and some of the and I don't want to call it alt-right. I'm calling it kind of like the freedom news or responsible news. But the alt-right, only because now that they call themselves the alt-right, of which so many people, so many of us who kind of get our news from these alternative sources don't consider ourselves right or left. It's more like a Buddhist middle path. I guess just a couple of examples. The Young Turks, led by Cenk Uygur, and who, I guess you'd call it a progressive or social justice warrior type of programming. And if I tune in on most of their quote-unquote normal kind of, let's call it Washington or American politics commentary, most of the time it's just not for me. Okay, they have a view of reality that seems to be taken from the Ministry of Truth, and it's also a lot to me of very adolescent themes. This whole thing about people's feelings. Again, this only in polarity thinking. Only when it's either or do things like saying that the over concern for people's feelings isn't adult. And people go, oh, what do you think? You should just disregard all people's feelings? This is polarity thinking, where you either coddle or you're abusive, as opposed to negotiating each situation. Somebody who you might think can actually maybe handle certain information. And again, it's just an observation. When you share your observation with somebody about somebody else, it's your observation. And if they have enough self-worth and inner integrity about who they are, what you say shouldn't even matter. I mean, you could say, okay, you gave me your opinion. That's how you see me. So you're an interesting person. So, and that's the other thing. When people give you your views, you can kind of, decide how you want to negotiate with different people based on, oh, they view me this way. They view me this way. I mean, it's intel. How people feel about you is their emotional intel to you. Because again, how people feel you is how they're processing you emotionally, not necessarily intellectually. And being with people being so devolving into just their emotions, it's almost like they're thinking emotionally. So anyway, so it becomes a whole, let's just say, shit show. Anyway, so I'm not on board with all that social justice warrior stuff. This has nothing to do with me tuning into my heart and negotiating through the world, trying to be the best anthropine I know how to be. But anyway, so on almost any day, if I were to go look at the Young Turks YouTubes, and if I tuned in, I would just be like, oh. But props, okay? Where are the props? They've done a few videos on Standing Rock. And of course, they're doing it from a really compassionate, this is ugly, this is horrible, this must stop. And that means that the government must stop aggressing and using military tactics against unarmed, peaceful water protectors who are doing it for all of us, not just for their land. We all like to drink fresh water, and we'd all like to be able to just source it from our well, not have it sold to us by Nestle. So protecting the water is really important. So the Young Turks, I mean, I went there the other day just to see what's going on there. Because it's not like just because I disagree with people, I don't go and look and see what's on their mind. I want to know what's on everybody's mind. I love everybody. Even if I don't agree with you, even if I think you're almost borderline, socially retarded, I can't shut you out because, first of all, every day is a new day. And similarly, like I saw that Cenk and his crew, the Young Turks, were doing what I consider very positive coverage on DAPL and Standing Rock. When, like, let's say that the way the elections went, I'm kind of hopeful. I had really bad feeling about Hillary because she just really seemed like a warmonger and more of the same. And we all wanted a difference and a change. So even though Trump was quite a character, I thought he was the safer bet. So, of course, now he's there and we all got to feed him positive energy. And since he does do social media and tweeting, he actually gets to get feedback. I mean, Kelly Conway and Stephen Bannon, the two people who kind of consult him. Kelly Conway was his campaign manager. Steve Bannon is kind of like his right-hand man. And because, they kind of worked with social media and he's thinking about putting Mitt Romney in as Secretary of State, they're letting him know that the grassroots are not happy with his decision. How beautiful is that? Here's a president-elect making a decision. It's not, are you making your party happy? Are you making the people who put you in office happy? This is radically different. And this is in real time. Also, it filters up a couple of weeks later in real time. What's going on that day? Ooh, Mr. Trump, I don't think you want to appoint Mitt Romney. You are not going to be pleasing the people who put you into office. And I think you know that you serve the people you put into office. That's how it's supposed to work. It's supposed to be representative government. You represent the people that brung you. All right. So and I kind of got that as part of how things might roll out. We're all going to find out in this experiment called life. But from what I know of, I think from what I've heard, I didn't follow all speeches. I think I listened to like part of a speech on like the day before the election and really liked the humanness of him. I liked the way he was speaking to the crowd. But so I'm not really familiar with a lot of his stuff, and I didn't vote anyway. So, but from what I know of, he actually supports the corporations. Okay, maybe I go, oh, were you surprised? Well, as I kind of read him as a human being, yeah, I'm surprised. And so I'm just really hoping, and I might even use my own ability to put a comment section on certain places about we need to get on the right side of the Standing Rock and DAPL thing. And since if we get on the right side, and then we can tweet away or, use social media and let the person who seems to be misinformed, to let them know where we are on it, because that's where he needs to be on it. He can't take a stand that's opposite from his people. So that's why I really wonder where the people are on this. The mainstream media has, the Ministry of Truth. The Ministry of Truth has only covered it, and when they do cover it, I've reported this in the past, they distort it if they cover it, and they actually paint protesters as protesters, and they say they're violent and have weapons, and there are no weapons. They talk about men with pipes in their hand. I did this in another report. Yeah, pipes in their hand. Chanupas, the peace pipe. That's what they had in their hands because they were going there to pray. But that's not how the Ministry of Truth did it. They were there menacingly with pipes in their hands. If you think a peace pipe is a scary weapon, then you truly need safe spaces. So, kind of getting back to freedom is responsibility. So, listening to these different things now, there's another thing, and I actually took the title off of it was the deleting word. I had a bunch of things on there. It was one of my Mystic Blues, and I led with Pizzagate. I've taken Pizzagate off. Not because I don't have an opinion, but because some responsible people, and Alex Jones is one of them. And of course, he has a very big, huge $40 million a year organization running there, all funded by the different products they sell and things. And they cautioned, and I thought it was a good caution, and one that I heeded because it's tying into freedom is responsibility. This whole fake news thing is, again, I don't know whether it's a kind of normal new world order because of their lack of creativity, or whether or not they actually are now getting directions from artificial intelligence, or AI for short. And it seems to like the whole thing is what you do to get out in front of something is you realize how you're being perceived by the people, and then you take that perception and flip it around and throw it on the other person so they have to defend against what you are actually guilty of. So the Ministry of Truth is guilty of news that really, if it isn't fake, is so twisted, it doesn't resemble what it was. And backwards, slanted, biased. I mean, it gets ugly. So basically, this whole thing of fake news is because that's how they're perceived. So now you defend against what we really are. It's a trick, and it's used by politicians. It's actually an ad hominem attack where it's name calling. So, but to really, because I'd like to think that this organic, very human or anthropine rising is about integrity. It's about responsibility. So now I think it's a cover story that I think it's the Washington Post put it out, where they're talking about there's a man who runs the Ping Pong Pizzeria, and there's also another guy. So he was named. I'm not going to name him right now, and everything points to Pizzagate being about pedophilia and child molesting and possibly worse. That's what it looks like. All right. Doesn't mean we're right. And there is somebody put something in my head that I'm willing to proceed with caution, largely because it's responsible to proceed with caution. Especially there is a man who owns the pizzeria. It does look like he's involved in some really icky things. But if for some reason, either A, we're reading it wrong, which I don't think we're reading it wrong, but perhaps we're being fed disinfo. Perhaps some of these leaks were actually meant to try and make somebody look bad when they're not, and further evidence will come out and go, oh no, this was a fake feed or something. Anyway, there is a man who owns a pizzeria. Child trafficking is a very serious offense, and it should only be stuck on somebody, even as a hypothetical, if we are really, really sure. It's one thing to kind of be announcing scandals, especially public people. So anyway, freedom is responsibility. I feel we should be free to say whatever we want, and not only do I feel it, it's what is kind of understood even at the entry levels of any sacred texts. The Constitution of the United States is that we recognize God as the sovereign. We don't have a king or a queen. God is our sovereign, and we are the sovereign subjects, and all of our rights derive from our sovereign God. Okay, so they're not written rights. Okay, this isn't a bunch that the government can let you do this or let you do this or whatever. And I'm big on freedom. I mean, what can you do? To me, I should be able to do anything my neighbors don't mind me doing. All right, that's because that's what we're living in social contracts with each other. And of course, I mean, we're talking about reasonable people. We're not talking about going into small pockets of dysfunction where things might be like that. But then again, they create their own societies. I mean, that's a conversation that's probably a little, well, certainly beyond this conversation. And we're all going to have to understand what freedom and responsibility are in a large group for us to be able to have a large group conversation about certain subjects. But it's like, I think I was in my last one, I just said, when you hear the word freedom, you should hear responsibility. Okay. So for us, those of us who I mean, with my small subscription base, I am not even a nascent pimple on any kind of surface. Thank you for all my subscribers, and please, if you like the videos, put a thumbs up and please subscribe if you'd like to stay in touch. But I still consider myself part of this movement to get information of value to people, and commentary and being thoughtful. I mean, I hardly consider myself to be a news type site, but I was looking at somebody else who has quite good subscriber base. Matter of fact, you think he's grown about 5,000 or 6,000 since I've been tuning into him. This is a guy, Sticks, Hex, and Hammer. And because he's, got interesting spiritual beliefs, he puts up videos. I guess he gives kind of like classes on certain slants on esoterica. Seems pretty responsible guy. But I do notice if he puts up something about Trump, he'll have 9,000, 11,000 views. If he puts up one of his talks of the things that have probably got him started on his site, it's like 1/5, 1/4 of the viewership. So so as I look, because I want to be relevant, I want to bring value, and so it just really seems that commentary on the things that are going on in our life, because things are moving so fast right now. We're at crucial times. We are at a tipping point in Earth history, which Earth history is very tied into galactic history. I'll just put that as an aside. So in many ways, I'm getting that what people really want is a conversation, discussions about what is really going on day to day, and that this is probably no time to be talking about chakras and auras, sacred texts or anything, unless again you're bringing something into the conversation. So freedom equals responsibility, but freedom and responsibility are not just about making videos and trying to be a source of information. Freedom and responsibility are about, to me, looking forward as we start to hopefully get rid of the patrix, that legal web that is dropped on us like a net, so that when we go to do something and be free, we're ensnared. You can't do that. Cop shows up. Here's a time. Here's a fine. Here's a ticket. Show up at this court date. And meanwhile, none of your neighbors would have even noticed. They wouldn't have complained. So as the only way more and more people are going to say enough with all this legal stuff was when they realize that the law is embodied within us by being the created of the creator. And that we can handle this. We can handle it. Like, in other words, there's enough adults in a neighborhood to handle the situation. And we don't need endless regulation and laws and gotchas, because that's all they are. Gotcha, let me bill you. I mean, that's basically what so much of this stuff is about, is either A, being able to fine you or charge, again, get some money out of you or send you to prison, to one of these for-profit prisons. Again, making money on you. And the only way they can make money on it is you get stuck in that legal web. And then the only way you get, and then you got to hire a spider, we'll call them lawyers, to negotiate through the legal web. And meanwhile, what do? You have two spiders negotiating with each other with a spider up on the bench, and they decide how much juice they're going to get from you. And even if you get off, even if the state doesn't get paid, one spider gets paid. So somebody gets some juice because you got snagged in the web. So freedom and responsibility. So if we're ever going to be free of this, it's going to have to be where everybody just says, enough, this is enough. And they don't feel unsafe to be with their fellow man and woman, and thinking that without all of this webbing, if there wasn't somebody to snag somebody doing something, that there's a legislation where society would fall apart. We need to be able to count on each other society has largely been held up by us, not by our governments. And now somebody made a very good point, I guess somewhere, I guess up in Canada, it might have been Toronto, the cops went on strike. And I guess at first nobody really believed it. And then after 2 or 3 days, nobody saw any cops. And all of a sudden there were all kinds of break-ins, jewelry stores were robbed and things like that. That's pretty disgusting. That's really disgusting. That without police, that people would go and do that. Now, what portion of any group do you really think thinks like that? But the thing is, I really think we could do that on our own. That might be getting ahead of myself. I'd rather deal with the superstructure, government, and the endless regulations. Still keep police on the street, and instead of them having a bunch of stuff that they look for you to be breaking so they can find you, they just look for trouble, or they wait for somebody to call them and go. I mean, I'm not saying you have to call somebody when they see somebody breaking in a window. I've had to get in my own window. Unfortunately, the police asked me to show some ID. I thank them. Because, again, they saw me coming in a window. That's out of the ordinary behavior. They had every right to wonder what's going on there. I mean, I'm quite sure they thought in their head that could be me because I had locked myself out of my house. And they didn't approach me like I wasn't that. They just, basically, they were letting me know, if you're really you won't mind doing this. I said, I am really me, and I don't mind doing this. Thank you. So when I'm talking about freedom, I'm not necessarily talking about some kind of benign police force that is there to actually keep the mayhem down, and they do so at considerable risk to themselves. But they're not looking for lawbreakers because they're on all these laws. I mean, somebody breaking into a store, do you actually does anybody here know that theft isn't okay? Do you need a law to tell you that breaking into a store is against the law? If you do, you're not in touch with your creator. That's a slam dunk assumption. I mean, just like assaulting somebody, lying, cheating on your wife. I mean, there's any number of things that you don't need to legislate, that if you're really in touch, and even a few people in touch discussing things, it becomes really evident what we accept and what we don't. So I'm going to keep this short. I'm going to try and do shorter ones now. Well, I'll save my windiness for when I make Mystic Views with Shelley, because I think people actually prefer when I do with Shelley. I know I get really nice comments sometimes from people about how Shelley and I handle subjects, and Mystic View is or I consider my main my main show. And fortunately, Shelley has joined me. So these mystic brews, mystic blues, mystic spews, mystic clues, whatever. I'm going to try to keep them at around 20 minutes, no more than a half an hour. And actually get them up a little bit more, because I want to have a dialogue. There's a lot going on, and I want to be in the conversation. All right, so remember, freedom is responsibility. And just a word of caution, again, with the Pizzagate thing. I think something smells really, really bad there. But now that we know that if law enforcement isn't going to handle it, with all the news here, then maybe we can take a clue about that. I mean, what are we going to do? Go down there with baseball bats? I mean, again, local things have to be handled locally. But it is clearly, we might be getting ahead of the horse. And again, especially if for some reason somebody decided to put a bunch of fake Twitter posts, whatever. I don't know how they would do that. I mean, again, I think this is highly unlikely. But when it comes to erring on the side of caution, I don't mind being cautious. I'm aware that if there is what's going on is going on, that it probably hasn't stopped. But I like to think that this kind of spotlight has, at least if there was any activity going on there, that perhaps people go, let's take a couple of weeks off. So in which case, while we take a little time out to make sure that we're not smearing somebody, that at the same time we might not have to went, well, if we're not doing this, maybe we have, there are all kinds of crimes still being committed. I think this kind of spotlight would have, if there's criminal activity, that it would be cool. And I know it looks like I'm trying to be on both sides of the fence. I'm not. I have put forward what my gut is telling me, but the last thing I would want, ultimately would hurt my heart, is if for somehow this person was in fact not who they look like, and we're saying that. That would break my heart. I wouldn't want to do that to somebody. That would be on me. I'd have to go into my own self and work through the forgiveness process. And so anyway, that's it. Because freedom requires responsibility. Let's not forget that. Okay. I love you all. God bless you all. Good night.